fortune is finding the perfect market. Finding a market that's large, a market that's growing quickly, a market with few barriers to entry. But great businesses, sustainable businesses, create new markets. They create new markets by tackling the seemingly insurmountable challenges, the barriers to entering that particular market. And they do this with unique, novel ideas. We are growing incredibly quickly in the market we are in today. But the bane of incredible growth is that it gets harder and harder each day to replicate that same growth yet again. We're pushing against the market penetration frontier. If we want to keep up this growth, we need to enter new markets. We need to start fresh on this particular curve. But which markets? Asia presents the greatest growth opportunity. Asia is growing at an incredible pace, faster than any other part of the world. But the Asian market also presents certain seemingly insurmountable challenges. Labor costs are very low in Asia. This means the relative value of productivity is low. See, for the price of a drill, if I can hire 10 guys with a hammer and a chisel, I don't want to be the person selling that drill. Our core value proposition is productivity. This is the key problem. This is the key problem that we need to solve before we determine which market we enter. We know we want to grow. We know we want to grow by entering a new market. We know the Asian market presents the greatest growth opportunity. But how do we tackle this critical root problem that our value proposition does not necessarily match the demands of the Asian market? We do this with innovation. But how? We're going to do this while increasing our margins and remaining a premium product. We're going to do this with a one-kit equipment rental program. So think about this. You purchase equipment for your home renovation project. The project is over, and now what happens? The equipment sits there. But what if instead I offered you premium equipment, better equipment, that really works better, allows you to be more productive at a comparable price with just the condition that you have to return this equipment after use? Isn't that interesting? But what about industrial customers? Industrial customers purchase their own equipment. For this, we have One Key Lite, which is an industrial productivity platform. The key factor industry looks at is cost savings. And we found, interestingly, that just by monitoring workers closely, their productivity goes up by between 30 and 300%. And we're going to look at those case studies later in this presentation. But that is a key value proposition here. How can we monitor workers with tools? We do this by having an SD card installed in this tool that tracks the tool usage, and then that SD card is returned to management at the end of the day, end of the week, whatever time period they want to monitor their workers at. And then the management can now not only use it to monitor worker productivity, but identify the key bottlenecks in their workflow. This is really interesting value for industry. And finally, we're going to answer the big question: which market do we enter? We're going to enter the Chinese market. It's East Asia's largest and fastest growing market. But there's more. There's a saying, you never test the depth of water by putting both feet inside. We want to try first with Beijing. We're going to test this model, see how the market responds in Beijing, and then expand to the rest of China. What about the impact of these recommendations? It's $180 million in incremental revenues by 2020, so that's a 5-year projection. We're going to get a 10% market share in China, Asia's largest market, and we see a $124 million NPV after taxes on this project just in China over the next 10 years. We're now going to look at each of those 3 recommendations in detail, and we're happy to answer any questions as we explore these recommendations. Let's begin.
So we need to enter the Chinese DIY market by launching an innovative rental program, OneKit, fulfilling every consumer's home improvement needs. The way OneKit will work is that consumers will go in and they can rent either individual projects or pick from specially created packages tailored to specific projects. Facility of actual delivery and pickup will be done by Citi-HKUST, China's largest ride-sharing app. And finally, consumers will have the opportunity to keep this equipment for 1, 3, or 6-week durations, allowing ample time for project adjustment and completion. Having a rental program is really the ideal platform to enter a market like China. It provides incredible flexibility and optionality that consumers don't currently have. It eliminates the barrier of commitment. Consumers can now pick the best tools, best brands, and as many tools as they want, even for a one-time project, making home improvement that much more accessible. While DIY is growing, Do It For Me, or DIFM, remains the most popular choice in China. Chinese consumers want to improve their homes, but don't necessarily want to do it themselves. At the same time, they want a high level of control. They want creative liberty. They want oversight. Oftentimes, consumers are hiring out laborers, but they're unsure of whether or not the equipment they're using is really top of the line and high quality, so they actually choose to provide their own equipment. With the rental program, we really fulfill the need for control. Consumers can again pick the best products, best tools, and best brands to be used by these laborers in their own homes. Finally, we really want to have strategic partnerships with Citi-HKUST and local craftsmen to really create mutually beneficial relationships that will enhance our entry into China, creating greater brand awareness, adoption, and trust. With our rental program, we want to provide Chinese consumers with better access, better flexibility, and better control, ultimately allowing them to have better homes. Yes?
Rental is an interesting concept, but how does it help to increase my revenue? That's the first question. And then, who will be responsible for maintaining and repairing of all these? Have we looked at the cost efficiencies of the program?
Yes. The first factor is cost. So the underlying assumption here is that we can charge a much higher rate, something comparable to purchasing the current lower-end equipment in the market just for renting it, but then have a high utilization rate. So these projects can last 1 to 6 weeks, the renovation projects, and if they return it after, we hand it over to the next customer. So there is a great opportunity there in terms of pricing and volume. Does that answer the question, or are you looking for something more specific?
Go on.
Okay. I can expand on the revenue model here. The idea here is that the maintenance part you mentioned, which tends to be the cost driver, we address this by having, purchasing a self-storage company in China. The idea is that we now have a sort of distribution network, some convenient locations where customers can pick it up if they want. The other factor we want to do is automate this process of checking whether they return the tools and maintaining them. We know the tools that we provide, if they're high quality, we're hoping maintenance is low. But one key way we can do this is by having the person that picks it up, maybe Citi-HKUST or whoever, simply weigh the package to make sure that everything has been returned in that package, or all the equipment is in there as required. If the next customer finds that there's a problem, they can report it and we'll refund it, and we'll charge the customer that returned it for whatever missing equipment in that. So that way we can eliminate the labor cost and a lot of the part that is very expensive to handle, that is checking all the equipment that comes back. Does that address the question? Yeah. Awesome.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. Go ahead.
The importance of the network effect. When you sell a tool and you have a common platform, that encourages the end user to buy more tools. I've got the charger, I've got the battery, I'm in the system, I'm going to add more tools to my system. If I rent the tool, then what importance does the brand play? Because I may be buying some tools just to do the job, but I'm not really looking to expand a system because I don't own it. There's no platform, there's no network effect, there's no locking me in. It's, I go out and use the tool, but then once I've completed the job, I return it. So there's no, I can't wait for the next new model to come out so I can add onto my platform or my system. Now, yeah, obviously strategic partnerships is very relevant, but how do you solve the issue or the idea behind the whole network effect and the importance of a brand? Because at the end of the day, if a customer only uses it for 1 week or 2 weeks or 6 weeks, the brand really doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, they'll shop on price, wouldn't they?
Sure. So first, to address your question about the network effects. So an idea we had for the implementation was the importance of upselling to try more products. So when the customer goes online to order the product, they have their idea of the specific job they want to do. So we'll have the toolkit that they can use for that job, but then we'll also have the toolkit that can do the same job, but it's more interesting products that you can do with it. So the potential to upsell there, to try out the diversity of the brand and the different products. As well, they'll also have the option to add accessories on. And these are accessories that they can keep after as well. And this serves two purposes. One, again, upselling with high margin items, the accessories. And once you have the accessories lying around your house after, that keeps the motivation to go back and do the job. As well, when they're actually doing the job, we hope that the premium quality of these products shines through and that they realize they are using the best in the business, and that will create brand loyalty for their next project.
If I could add one thing on the network effects, we do plan on having a subscription model here. If they do a lot of home renovation projects, they can subscribe and they'll have free delivery and certain other options. Like if you get the equipment rented for 1 week, we can extend that to 3 weeks for you free if no one else has booked it, and certain other features. So in terms of a network effect, if you're on the subscription platform that you pay a monthly fee for or a yearly fee for, you're a lot more likely to keep or stick to that platform because you get certain benefits on that particular platform.
Okay, on that. Okay. So Ryobi actually is more like a consumer do-it-yourself brand and products. So have you done any research on how big is the consumer do-it-yourself market in China? Because apparently, because of the structure of the buildings, because of the working habits and the like, I don't know how big that market can be and will be.
Sure. So we use a couple factors when entering to China, which we'll also dive deeper into later. And a few of those factors, first we looked at the general size of the market, and China is much greater in the hand tool and power tool market. Furthermore, we also considered growth, so not only they're big, and they're growing. So that's nice if we're looking at general size, but in terms of actual usage in the consumer market, we did research on the affinity towards these products. And there was the interest from Chinese consumers, as well as we also looked at an interesting metric of wage growth and looked at the emerging middle class. So the middle class is growing. They have more money to spend on these DIY projects, and they're interested, and the market is substantially big. So between those three factors, we believe that there'd be a large enough consumer market.
Great. So now that we look at why DIY, let's look at exactly how this breaks down the current barriers to overall adoption in the Chinese market. We've identified 3 main barriers that prevent consumers from buying power tools or subscribing to them at TTI. The first barrier we've identified is overall affordability. As we can see from that map, in China, the amount of money spent on power tools is lower simply because of income disparities that we can see between North America and Asia. The second area we've identified is an overall lack of storage space. When we think about apartments in a crowded area of Beijing, we think that they're very small. It's very difficult for us to store large power tools that take up a lot of space. We've circumvented this barrier by providing a rental program. The rental program means that you can return this product as soon as it's been used, as soon as you're done with the project. The third barrier we've identified is lack of transportation. While this seems like a very simple process in many parts of the Western world, the fact of the matter is that vehicle ownership in China and other Asian markets tends to be much lower. This means that when you're carrying an extremely heavy tool from the retail location to your home, you really have no means to do that. While you could also go ahead and hail a taxi, we have added value to the overall process by providing that service for you through a strategic partnership. The second part of our overall implementation is unlocking the industrial market. This is using one key light, an extension of existing technology proprietary to TTI.
Can I ask a question just before you move on to the industrial market? So if I think about this market and I think about the people that I know who are DIY enthusiasts, they're the type of people who actually really enjoy having their tool collection. And they're quite prideful of it. Everything's in its correct place. And it's a source of identity almost for them. Then I think about the other people, and I'm one of them, which is I have no interest whatsoever in owning any tools nor doing any DIY. It seems like what you're proposing here sits somewhere in the middle. Do you think that market exists, and how would you grow that market?
Definitely. So that was actually.
Sorry,
a
and
very-
I have a
Of
follow-up
course.
question on that though. Why do you pick Beijing as a pilot? Was that based on some kind of research, or is related to the barrier that you've mentioned?
Okay, so I'll actually address Jonathan's questions first, and then Nicola will go ahead and answer yours. When it comes to kind of playing in the middle of the field, that was a very strategic move for TTI, because when we think about the Chinese market, there's really two players. So we have the DIYers who are very enthusiastic, they have a collection, and they value premium. These individuals often have the same price barriers, the same storage barriers, and the same transportation barriers that we've mentioned. But there's also another really interesting segment called Diffie, so do it for you. So this is a segment of the Chinese population or the Asian population that often uses contractors. But because of the nature of construction work, it's often commonplace to see that contractors use sub-quality products and materials. So by getting the Diffie crowd into renting these products and providing to the contractors, you're more likely to circumvent the corruption that's often commonplace in the construction industry.
What is the value proposition to someone who, a contractor, if you will?
To a contractor, the idea is that they go in, they're only supplying labor, they don't have to worry about organizing a lot of other things. And to the consumer, they know that the quality of the product they're getting is very good. It's a severe concern in certain parts of Asia where contractors are not that, I mean, you want to make sure that whatever materials are used in your house are good materials and that it's built well. That's not as easy to verify, especially in certain parts of Asia, and that's where that market of, you know, I want to make sure that I'm supplying the materials that my contractor's using really comes in. Contractor's point of view, premium quality materials, they don't have to bring it to the site themselves. It's all provided, so it's a lot better. From their point of view, they could cost the project purely based on labor, so there are some conveniences there. I also wanted to point out another small factor. I think the traditional do-it-yourself crowd doesn't necessarily exist in China. I think we're trying to create a do-it-yourself market in China. I don't think that market's going to be like the traditional way we think about do-it-yourself people in North America or other parts of the world, where we have a garage like my dad with a lot of different tools in there. I think the Chinese, you know, tool enthusiast will still have issues with space constraints, and I think the rental model can help them. Anything we can do to enhance that market, like creating, you know, my personalized tool library, for instance, on this platform they're ordering, might help them with that attachment to tools specifically.
Sorry, I have a question. Actually, not a question, but some thinking. Because my experience with the contractor is that they may like to use their own tool, and the difficult part for us to make sure that whether they will use my own tool is I have to monitor them perhaps 12 hours a day. So how can we do that to monitor them? And it's sometimes very difficult for contractors who are experienced contractors. You hire them and you force them to use some tools, which they may find it very difficult to operate. So this is my own thinking and comment as to how practical it is as to a suggestion. Thank you.
We're gonna address Mr. Lim's question momentarily, so don't worry. As to your concern as to whether or not the contractors will, you know, say, oh yes, we'll take the tools for now and then use their own products, that actually falls into our second solution, which is really related to the industrial market, but can also be applied in this market as well. So this is really called One Key Light, which is a tool to track productivity and track whether or not the workers are actually doing the work they've been assigned to do. It really is able to measure and provide reports and analytics to whoever is managing them or supervising them as to the nature of the work that was done and whether or not the machine was being used productively.
So to address your question from before about why specifically we chose Beijing as our beta test. So when thinking about markets, our first criteria was size and attractiveness. Where would we be able to, I guess, capture a large portion of people? So we first narrowed it down to Beijing and Shanghai. And then our second criteria was the affinity. Where could we find people who are most likely to do these DIY projects? So we thought about the jobs and the industries within these two cities, and we know that Shanghai is very finance focused, which may mean less free time. So with that, we chose Beijing as our beta test, but we plan to move into Shanghai after as we penetrate into mainland China.
A quick note on selecting the segments, particularly to address the question of, you know, whether all contractors will like this. I think we're definitely picking a certain specific segment in the market and penetrating that. There are going to be contractors who are going to use their own tools, and that's definitely not the customer base we're going after. We're going after those that are hiring slightly less experienced contractors for a certain job, maybe on price. They're the people that want to, supply their own tools. Not every project is definitely going to suit our market. We understand that, and that's how we've structured it.
And one question on the single market, Beijing. How cost effective will it be? We've got a business to run, right? So we are here to make profits. So going in just into one city, I don't think it's cost justified us going into, except that, okay, we tell people we are in China, great. But so do you have a longer plan how we can roll out all these projects and eventually how we can start making profits? Because I would imagine the first year or two, it will be investments, strategic investments. But going forward, what's your plan?
So I think there's really two segments to that question. So the first segment is kind of overcoming the risk. I mean, we're investing time, resources, and all of that. And the second question is overall implementation. Where are the revenues and profits coming from down the line? I'll address the first part of your question, which is the risks. And we've identified three major risks, really. So the first risk is that consumers don't end up taking to the DIY market. They're just not interested. The second risk is that the industrial market doesn't see value in the products that we're offering and the strategy that we'll expand on later. The last risk we've identified is that by investing time and resources into the Asian market, we kind of stop focusing on our core geographies and end up expending resources and not being able to recount those investments. The reason why we need a test period or a test market in Beijing is to verify the hypotheses that we've made and ensure that we're not, jumping in head first and losing too much. This is really a test market, and there will be expansion and reiteration for sure as a result of the learnings that we will have in Beijing. We've learned key lessons from key partners such as Home Depot. Several years ago, Home Depot entered the Chinese market, and they did it too fast, too aggressively, and too soon. By learning from Home Depot, a partner that we can definitely leverage and have communications with, we're able to say, you know what, we can't do this all at once, but we can test it out in more market in order to reduce the risk and in order to learn from that one specific area before moving to other mainland cities.
In terms of implementation, our short-term plan is our beta test in Beijing and then move to the mainland China. As well, we see Japan as an attractive market, and into the future, we considered some other countries as well.
We'll let you now finish with your
Awesome. So we've touched briefly on the industrial market, and to recap, industrial market is One Key Light. One Key Light is a proprietary technology at TTI, and what One Key Light does is enable industrial firms to keep track of what their employees are doing. Too often, we see corruption in the construction industry, and this really lowers productivity. If we look at two studies, so first in theory based on a study from the emerging market in the construction industry, and secondly a real-world application, we see that three of the major barriers to productivity in the construction industry is overall lack of labor supervision, a lack of management talent, and then thirdly, frequent unscheduled breaks that really dig into overall productivity. What this study found is that by monitoring and providing some kind of insight or program in order to monitor the day-to-day workings, you're able to increase productivity. But we didn't think that theory was enough. So we had to look at the overall actual application of this kind of thinking in real life. We looked at Alair, a medical manufacturing organization that implemented a tracking program to see electronically how productive their employees were being in a factory. By implementing a tracking program, they were able to create overall accountability in individual workers and also identify bottlenecks because they were able to see where in the process things were being slowed down. Alair found that they were able to increase productivity in some working shifts by up to 300%, something that we believe provides real value to the firms that we would be working with. Next, we'd like to reiterate some of the reasons behind the Asian location that we chose, and Nicola will be covering that.
So we've talked about how we chose our location based on market attractiveness, as well as affinity for DIY and our ability to add value. So moving forward, we see that China and Japan are the largest market in terms of power tools and hand tools, as well as growing the fastest. So next we looked at a key metric which we thought was important for penetrating the consumer and the industrial market. And this was wage growth. When compared to Asia, China substantially has greater wage growth than other Asian countries. Now, why is this important? When we move forward, we talked a little bit about how more wage growth means more income for the middle class and more ability to buy consumer products. But as for the industrial market, wage growth, as we talked about before, means it becomes less of a feasible possibility to just hire more workers in order to fulfill your job. So this means our productivity enhancing technology adds more value. Furthermore, the case study that Tusani just talked about, by having productivity enhancing technology and monitoring could increase productivity by 300%. So these factors in combination, we believe, makes it feasible to sell a premium priced product. Moving forward into some feasibility. So we need to consider human, financial, and operation considerations about our recommendation. On the human side, we want to set up a China office in order to have mainland knowledge on the market. Financially, we need to consider the cost of R&D of the new product of the One Key Light. And operationally, we know we want to have this new renting model, so looking at the specifics on how the value chain would be altered for this recommendation. Next, we'll move it on to Tusani, who will just touch a little bit more on risks.
Sorry, I think we have just 2 or 3 minutes left. If we were just to pick two, the DIY and the industrial, the One Key Light, which one would you pick and why?
Both are very attractive markets, but in this particular case, I would try and do the do-it-yourself market. The primary reason for that is that with the industrial market, it's a lot easier for competition to enter. Whereas with the DIY market, we're putting customers on a platform, a rental platform. We're contacting customers directly. See, B2B customers are very price conscious, and they'll constantly review, the value of the products they're getting. If someone else copies their technology, especially with lower intellectual property protection in China, there's a good chance that we'll get competition there. So there, the primary advantage is first mover, get in the market quickly. But DIY, you have this platform people are familiar with. This is where I get all my tools. Any home renovation project, I go on this platform. I just order my tools. For a specific job, everything is there, right? Like if I want to do a kitchen renovation, here's a kitchen renovation kit that comes in. We basically develop a sustainable advantage in the market, and we actually work with the brand, because now consumers are connecting directly with our brand, with our platform, as opposed to going through a middle person, an industrial customer or a distributor. So that direct brand recognition from the consumer is what is worth building in the long run, and that's why I'd say DIY is definitely the higher priority.
And you assume a freshman will easily handle the tools.
Sorry, could you?
And you assume a freshman, anybody could easily handle the tool?
Oh, a new person would easily handle the tool? I think if we look at the market generally, we definitely have the best design tools. We have the tools that are most ergonomically feasible. I think the Chinese market is getting there. As labor becomes more expensive, housing prices are very high. People are looking at doing renovation projects themselves. There's definitely a learning curve, but there are a lot of instructional videos on YouTube, social media. It's becoming a thing now. People are really learning how to use these tools themselves. I think in that particular market, we have the best advantage because we have the most usable tools, the most ergonomic tools. It's a premium product.
If you choose DIY being your focus market,
yep.
I'm really surprised that you choose Beijing and Shanghai as your test market, because I understand these two markets are the most brand conscious cities in China. So I don't think DIY will generate any brand preference or whatsoever.
That's a great question. We really took brand preference into account because when we're looking at the typical DIYer, they tend to be a bit more established. They're up to date with modern trends. And we see that there's also a level of brand prestige in some of the brands at TTI. So, for example, Milwaukee, Ryobi, they have a really strong rapport as opposed to many other brands. Moving forward, what we want to really look at is overall financial implications because we believe that this is the plan that will drive value from both segments.
Thank you. So through our recommendations, we have analyzed and determined the following financial impact on the company. So we look at entering China in the next few months and then taking what we've learned and what we know and figuring out how we can enter Japan in the next 2 years in 2017. And through our analysis, we projected an NPV for this project of over $124 million in US dollars and 2026 revenue from just China and Japan of almost $350 million. And finally, we project a 2026 estimated market share within China of 14.5%.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you guys see this company? Sorry, no questions last minute, right?
Okay.
Thank you, Team 1, for the presentation. Shall we give them a big round of applause?